Hey, all. Welcome to Coach's Corner. As always, I'm joined with my beloved co-host, Mike Lamb of Focal Point Coaching of Utah, and I am Adam Geheb of Focal Point Coaching of Cary. So thank you all for joining us yet again on this lovely, lovely day. Today, I kind of want to do a quick, I won't say flip and spin, Mike, but you know, this time of year, everyone's talking about what they're going to do next year and strategic plans and what they want to change, right? What they want to do differently in 25 than they did in 24. And so, one of the questions that I've been asked a lot lately is around change implementation, right? And what are the best practices and principles in order to get that change not only ingrained in your employees or the organizational structure, but how do you kind of evaluate its effectiveness? Did it work? Did it not work? And so, we both come from different backgrounds and industries, and I just figured we'd have a little chat today around, change implementation and best practices. How's that sound?
That sounds great. Love that topic.
Yeah, no, it's great. So, now
One
I
we've
can
all
put
dealt
you
with
on
a
the
lot.
spot, right?
Yeah.
Um, how do you enact change and make sure that it is actually taken hold within an organization?
Yeah, there's a good formula for this we talk about, and maybe we won't give out the whole formula right up front here and just let the cat out of the bag. But the thing with change is first of all, you gotta know why you want to make change.
Yeah.
Why are we having change? What uh what motivated us to want to make change?
Yep.
Um, so that usually starts with some sort of dissatisfaction with our results,
Yeah.
with our
Yep.
what's happening in the workplace. I'm not certain, we come from different industries and, oftentimes dissatisfaction in construction industries, maybe not being able to communicate with their employees very well, and
Yep.
there's a problem there, or projects aren't getting completed on time because there was a hiccup where parts weren't ordered for a project. So that might be what thing, that they'd identify for change, that they need to make a change, and there's just needs to be that dissatisfaction up front that we need to change and improve, get better,
Yeah.
and we can be better.
So
Let's
in the software world, you know, dissatisfaction can run the gamut in multiple things, but I actually don't think that the dissatisfaction is going to be all that different across industry, right? Lack of efficiency, lack of being able to consistently hit the mark. I think that's probably universal across everything. Now, one key point that I want to add to the notion of being able to identify that dissatisfaction, Mike, is the dissatisfaction has to be high. It can't just be something that causes pain for a small bit or a small segment of the organization. I'm not saying it has to be universal, but the pain point and the lack of addressing that pain point has to cause some serious harm in the business unilaterally for that to really be something that people all want to take action on, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, not just an individual's dissatisfaction. I agree completely with you on that. And that sometimes is confusing for a leader because sometimes we're dissatisfied with things, but it's not a global dissatisfaction in our company. So
That's funny. So, as a leader, you have to make sure that it's not just your own personal views and your own personal feelings that are driving the changes within the organization. I don't know how many times you've seen this, but I've seen this a whole bunch through my past life career where someone has had an itch to scratch. It was personal. And so they wanted to drive a change because, well, it made them mad. No one else felt that pain. No one else understood, why this was something we were all working on, but we all got pulled off of everything that we were doing, put on hold to go scratch this itch. And guess what? Those itches never lasted.
yeah,
It was never a change that took hold. Well, because we didn't like it, right? We didn't know why we were doing it. We actually resented the fact that we had to stop and put all of our lives, our wants, our projects on hold to address something that didn't add value to us, right?
yeah,
So I think that that's a great example of in today's leaders, you have to have the visions and understanding of your entire organization when you're making decisions to pivot either towards or away from something that you've done prior, right? And understanding the ramifications of those changes, man, that's critical to be able to enact change successfully throughout the organization that is sustainable.
But yeah, if we feel like there's something we're dissatisfied with, and you just use the word vision,
Mhm.
what does that look like if we do change it? And the best way to do that as a leader is to communicate and get feedback from your team members, and from trusted people that you work with and are can communicate with openly, get negative and positive feedback
Mhm.
on the thing that we have dissatisfaction with and want change. And the other side of that is we need to listen to other people's opinions on what they're dissatisfied with so that we can get the feedback and create a vision that works for not only me, but it works for the whole entire company and the team.
Okay. So let's recap. Step one, identify the dissatisfaction and make sure that it is something that is felt by a large majority or will have a large impact on the organization. Got it. Um, what's next?
Step two, just talked about it, vision. The
Okay.
vision of what we want it to be like when it's done
Okay. So this is
is implemented.
okay. So this is AKA identify what life will look like if we have solved said problem. Correct? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And now, why do we actually want to focus on what it will look like when it's solved? Why do we try to have people think about that?
We have to have them take some ownership of that vision and see it as well.
Okay.
So we can't just be like, I want only this done this day and not tell them anything else other than that's it.
Okay. So
Like,
you're talking about like a
I'm
feedback
gonna
loop, right?
change this to make your job better.
Okay.
To get the data we need or the information we need, these are just examples.
Cool.
To
So feedback, I think, is
make your life
important.
better.
Yep.
What?
Yep. So I think, to add to that, getting that feedback is fantastic, right? Because it helps kind of cement the vision for the organization. I think one of the other reasons why I think it's important for people to kind of visualize things in the future, and we've touched about this a little bit in past episodes, when you think about what a change will do for you and the betterments, the improvements that it will make, it tends to spawn other ideas. So
Yeah.
if we solve problem X, okay, well, now I have this new world, this new ecosystem, this new environment in which I'm operating. Well, what can I do that I couldn't do before? And I think, getting people to think about the vision and the future in something where you've eliminated this massive pain point is a catalyst for growth and innovation. And so I think that there's some really good ideas that can be spawned for future goals, future projects that can come out of that envisioning process. So another reason why I think, forecasting that vision and kind of talking through the outcome is extremely helpful.
Yeah. 100%.
Awesome.
Being able to give them that vision. Imagine you're sitting in a room with Steve Jobs one day and he's like, I want to change our whole platform in cell phones.
And you know what's funny? At the given time, I remember this so clearly. I was sitting there in an office in IBM, and I'm like, man, who the heck would spend $1,000 for an Apple phone? That makes no sense. Well, gosh, I was wrong.
Yeah. I'm sure that he went with a really strong vision into that meeting with the thing that he wanted to change about the company.
Man, I didn't get it. Granted, I'm
Probably his
still I'm still not an
dissatisfaction with
iPhone guy, but
P9ing or something at the time.
oh man, I kind of hope not because that would have been scary. Um, all right, let's get back on track
Yeah,
here. All right, so dissatisfaction, vision.
vision.
Third one, Mike. What is it?
The first steps, how are we going to get there? What are the simple things we can do to get going to get to that change in that vision?
Yeah.
And what are we doing tomorrow? Might be taking a half hour's time tomorrow. And maybe we have to spend 10 hours next week on this or X amount of time. Get those little steps that you need to get going. If you're sitting in a room
Yep.
with a bunch of your team members and each person is a piece of that, they need to know what their little steps are. to
without
get.
identifying that first step, it doesn't matter how great the idea is. It doesn't matter how much people hate or are dissatisfied with the way things are today. Without that first step, you're never making progress. There's no inertia that starts. You're it's status quo, right?
I
Ho
uh
hum, ho
I
hum.
always use a very, very simple example of this, and there was a lot of dissatisfaction with how our trucks were. They're
Mhm.
dirty all the time, inside and out.
Yep.
My vision is I want to have nice trucks. We bought all these assets. I want them clean and looking good.
Yeah.
First step, okay, let's do this. First step's really simple. Let's have somebody come detail them and then put in an action plan from there to keep the trucks clean forever.
Right.
You know?
Right.
That's a really simple one, but that first step needs to be an easy one. They say change should be like a 10-minute thought process if you want to really implement something quickly.
Yep. And
Like,
the other key piece about that first step, it shows that you've not only just thought through the problem, but you've at least gotten to the point where you've I won't say figured out the solution, Mike, but you know what that initial catalyst is, right? Um, that means that you've gone down the solutioning path. And especially if you think about this as if someone is raising a concern, right? Because you always hear employees say that they're dissatisfied with something that, process, person, um, something within the company or the org, but you can't ever just complain. You have to complain and come up with an alternative solution. And so to me, identifying that first step shows the ownership, the responsibility, and the accountability to not just complain about something, but you're taking that first step, that action to provide that initial step, right? And for me, as an owner, as a manager, as a leader, it was always critical to have my employees bring me a problem, a solution, and what that first step was, because that then made it easier for me to make it actionable.
have you ever sat in a meeting and the first step was never identified and everyone left not knowing where they were going with
Nope,
this?
never.
Like, no.
Yeah.
You must be
Of
meeting with
course.
different people.
No, I mean, of course. I actually had this conversation this week where people were talking through some challenges and some things that they wanted to handle. And I said, all right, well, what was the outcome? What was the action? What are you doing about it? They're like, oh, well, we talked about it.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? It's very similar to what you were just talking about, right? It's like, okay, well, you talked about it. Who owns it? Who's driving it? When does
Yeah.
it
And I
start?
think
When does it finish?
everybody likes to yell out a big deadline for it. Like, hey, we want this done by January 1. Today's December 6th. We want it done
Yep.
by January 1, but no one will make that deadline for that first step. What's the first step? What are you doing tomorrow?
I've got this little saying that I like to use with regards to first step. And it's basically no action equals no change. If you don't take action, you will not get any deviation from where things are today. So if you want things to stay status quo, great. Continue to have your conversations. Don't write anything down. Don't assign owners because nothing's going to change. No action equals no change.
I use a little quote just like that. Action creates motivation, right?
Oh, I like that. I like that. I like
Motivation
that.
doesn't create action. Action creates motivation. It'll motivate that change that you want to have
Mhm.
happen when you have that first step, that first action.
Okay. So dissatisfaction, vision, first step. And I'm assuming there's
Now,
going to be one more variable there.
just set it up again. That has to be greater. Those three steps have to be greater than the resistance we're going to find from
Okay.
change.
Okay.
So we have to be able to overcome that resistance and get them to that other side with the vision that we have.
Now, what happens if any one of those factors are low or zero, for instance?
We won't make it over that resistance. We'll go back to what we were doing before, or stay status quo, or we'll implement a little bit of change and people will do it for a while and then it'll die eventually and it won't be brought to fruition.
Far be it from me, but this sounds an awful lot like we just described Gleicher's formula.
Yeah. Yes, we did.
We did. We did. Now, you know what's really great about Gleicher's formula? Um, it really helps you figure out not just how to go about enacting change, but it lets you do a retrospective on what happens if your change didn't work or it didn't take hold. Um, I know we don't do this a lot, but do you mind if I go share and throw that up on the screen
Yeah,
and
love to see
talk through
it.
that really quick?
Yep. It's a
Cool.
good visual. It's a
I like this a lot, right? And so this is exactly what Mike and I were just talking about. The variables. We have our dissatisfaction, our vision, our first step, and then one that we didn't really talk about, but we kind of brought in through first step is the ownership, right? Who's going to actually drive that action. And so this is kind of what I wanted to talk through here. Now, what you just said, Mike, is you have to have all of these factors, right? And they have to be the sum of them has to be greater than the resistance to change in order for something to be successful. And that's what this top layer here is kind of talking through. Now, what I wanted to kind of piece through here is utilizing this formula, you can see if you have a low or a zero score of any of these factors, it'll tell you the output of what's likely going to happen, or retrospectively, what you saw with that
yeah.
particular change factor here, right? Like, let's just talk through this. So if you don't have a high level of dissatisfaction, this is saying we're going to have a slow start.
Yeah.
Well, of
Not
course,
known.
right? Why is that, Mike? I mean, that's really easy because not enough people have that same passion and driving force in order to go fix it.
Yeah.
Boom. Makes sense. You go handle the next one.
Perfect.
Well, what about this one here?
Well, if we don't have vision in the plan or where we want to go, you always have to have a point B, you know?
Yeah.
And if we don't have that, we're not going to take those little steps to get there. So there's not going to be any reason to go somewhere if we don't know where we're going.
Okay. So
We're
perfect,
going to go in a lot of different places.
right? So that leads to a lack of coordination, right? I mean, and then let's go down one. What if you're missing that first step? Well, I think it's
None of
obvious, but
us.
lack of action. Once again, back to my
We try to
comment.
jump to, step 10 and just be done with it.
No action, no change, right? And then last but certainly not least, without that creative leadership or that ownership or that person who's really going to oversee and own that project, that area, and that change implementation, well, A, you're going to get probably a lot of these things that aren't going to work, but you're just going to have frustration because there's no coordination of effort. You were kind of touching base on that a little bit prior. If you have multiple people that have to be involved and you don't have that global coordination, you may get each person out there doing their own thing because they own a piece of it, but no one's really bringing it all together so that it actually can be delivered as a singular unit, right?
Yeah, somebody has to own it and kind of close the loop on it,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So that, if a leader isn't communicating with their team and just puts this out there and then doesn't follow up on it, doesn't do things to inspire the change to get it done, they'll just kind of just put it off or procrastinate it as long as they possibly can because,
Yep.
they'll just wait for the leader to motivate them to get
Yeah.
there.
I absolutely love this principle. I use it all the time. It's kind of my go-to because not only does it help people lay things out in a logical manner, I love the fact that you can look back at your history and see what your successes or your misses were in
Yeah.
implementing change, and you can really kind of figure out what you did wrong, and it gives you a corrective action for the future. You know, one other thing that I kind of want to share with everyone here is I've kind of started to tweak this a bit, and so since I use glaciers so much, I've also started to kind of coaching that people should use this formula and this mindset in their writing of proposals, right? Every good change that I've ever seen happen had a documentation piece that went with it. You have to document your proposal. And in doing so, if you can highlight all of those different variables, right? So you identified the problem statement, you identified the solution, you identified the first step or action in order to execute, and you lay out the timeline, the owners, what skills, what resources are needed. And you can do that in the proposal statement. When you give that, uh, for someone to read, if everyone looks at it that same way, it's easy to digest and pull out all the, let's call it, dirty bits of exactly what you're trying to do. And so if you can wrap Gleichers in with your proposal statements and your proposal writing, I feel like that's super powerful. And so something that I've been coaching relatively recently is combining that into the proposal process. And it's something that's really been working well for me. So hopefully other people can start to do that as well.
Change is such a valuable thing to every organization. We have to change. We have to improve. We have to get better. We have to have a vision of where we want to go, and change. You know, without it, we'll just kind of fail or
Right.
decline back to where we were, and not move
Of
forward.
course. I mean, we can always go back and look at the principle of sigmoid's curve, right? If you don't reinvent and you don't change, you're destined to die on the vine. You are destined to fail because all businesses will go through that life cycle. And reinvention is that last, let's call it precipice point of you need to reinvent, you need to change. So, I think looking at change management and how to successfully implement change management is a critical piece to today's leadership. And so I'm really glad that we took the time to go over this principle.
Yeah,
And
me
I
too.
certainly hope it was helpful. Um, we're getting up there on minutes. So my last question for you is any kind of last thoughts or things that you'd like to impart?
No, I feel like I just did with my changed little speech. I feel good about it. So
Well, good. Let's not change the momentum that we've got here. So let's end this all now. So for all of you watching, listening, once again, thank you for joining us here at Captain's Corner. And so for Mike and myself, hope you found this useful. And until next week, guys, take care.
thanks, everybody.